Elite New York school melting down because radical woke faculty are threatening to strike unless the school capitulates to a radical, extreme, left-wing series of reforms. Fed up parents threaten to take their $50,000 plus a year tuition and walk. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today we start in New York. Another story from last year. We want a foreground for you as the tidal gates are about to burst. All of these radical new reforms coming to public schools. This school in New York, $54,000 to attend it every year by these moms and dads. The faculty have decided that they're not going to teach. They're not coming back unless the school completely adopts their radical anti-racist curriculum.
Now, you teased a little bit about how the parents are going to walk, but I assure you, this is Upper East Side of Manhattan.
They're not walking.
Dalton school parents, they will ride in their limos. They will not walk because they are elites. Now, it's a K-12 prep school. It's been around since 1919, and it actually was started by a very progressive woman named Helen Parkhurst, and she actually said that, let us think of a school where pupils themselves are the experiments. And that's what you have at Dalton School. And so what's happening is parents are paying this $54,000 tuition, and then now they are wanting, according at least to Jim Best, who is the current head of the school, they're committed to being a visibly, vocally, structurally anti-racist institution. But that's not enough, because we now have an anti-racist manifesto that has been signed by dozens of faculty members. And it calls for all these demands. And you know what? We're not going to teach. We're not going to do our job unless we have our list of demands met. It's an 8-page anti-racist manifesto. So we'll just go through some of them, shall we?
So let's just think in again. So you got a privileged teachers. That $54,000 a year in tuition goes to pay really good salaries. I'll bet you those teachers are making $100,000 each. I'll bet you.
Duh.
I bet you. These incredibly well-paid, better paid than teachers anywhere in the country, and they're doing this now. They're telling you, we're not going to teach your kids. We're not going to accept your $54K a year, rich New York person, unless you surrender control of what we teach to a radical, completely political curriculum.
Yes, that includes hiring 12 full-time diversity officers.
12 diversity officers for one public school.
Well, it's not public school. It's
public prep school.
Ivy League preparatory school.
12?
Also, they need multiple psychologists to support the students. Well,
sure.
You know what? I actually support that one because they need the support with these kids. They are probably pretty messed up after that. Anyway, it's not to help them. It's to help them, I guess, cope with race-based traumatic stress.
Allow me to engage in a exercise here. You see that page of demands?
Yeah.
I'm going to read them as quickly as I can.
Oh, gosh.
Stop me when you hear one that has anything to do with learning.
Oh, I can take the next couple minutes off.
Right? The hiring of 12 full-time diversity officers, an additional full-time employee whose entire role is to support black students who come forward with complaints. Hiring of multiple psychologists with specialization on the psychological issues affecting ethnic minorities. Pay off student debt for incoming black faculty members. Reroute 50% of all donations to New York City public schools. Eliminate AP courses if black students don't score as high as white kids. Required courses on black liberation. Reduce tuition for black students whose photographs appear in school promotional materials. Public anti-racist statements required from all employees. Mandatory community and diversity days to be held throughout the year. Required anti-bias training to be conducted every year for all staff, parent, volunteers. Mandatory minority representation in otherwise elective student government. So they elect people, you put black people on if no blacks are elected. Mandatory diversity plot lines in school plays. Wait, mandatory diversity plot lines. So if you're teaching Romeo and Juliet, the only way you're allowed to teach it is if you create a black character named Snoopio, right? And you put him in the play as an African American, so you have representation, and an overhaul of entire curriculum to reflect diversity narratives. Did you hear anything in there about education at all?
Do you need an oxygen tank?
No. I need a shotgun and access.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, when you read them all aloud, just as you did, it really encompasses truly what Dalton is all about. And I think if I had to pick one favorite, it would be compensating any student of color who appears in the promotional material, because they're just churning out the models. That's apparently what they're doing.
I take it, sadly, the school was not named after Dalton of Roadhouse fame. Is Patrick Swayze going to show up at the last minute and kick the asses of these idiots? It's probably not going to happen.
I mean, he'll be like the ghost?
Dalton.
Too soon.
We need a real Dalton here to purge the school of these idiots.
As we know,
roundhouse kick.
If you even remotely understood everything that Dr. Duke just rattled off there, you would know that if you met these demands, just the very first one about hiring the diversity officers and paying off the debt of the faculty, just the faculty-specific ones.
Just black faculty.
Yeah, sorry, black faculty. That would add millions of dollars to what Dalton, I mean, it's like they just want to operate everything in the millions instead of
and again, none of it has anything to do with education.
Smart.
None of it has anything to do with making your kid better reader, writer. It has not about teaching your kids better history. It is taking over your kids and brainwash. We've reached the point now where you can use the word brainwashing. This is brainwashing. This is cultural programming. This is the kind of stuff they used to do in China and the Soviet Union when they ripped kids away from parents and immerse them 24/7 in the kind of psyops that was guaranteed to make them loyal party members. That's what's happening to your kids in America, and you're paying $54K a year, Mom and Dad. I get for some of you New York highbrows, that's chump change. But still, for what exactly? So your kid can turn out angry, anti-American, anti-white. This is what you're spending your time on. Now, incapable of getting a job, incapable of doing college work, but ready to go out and fight the world in Antifa. This is what you want for $54K?
Now we have a story coming out of Nevada where we have a mom who's actually taking action in a lawsuit to defend her son's right to get out of a class that's all about, promoting the anti-white racism. Now, basically what happened is Gabrielle Clark didn't want her son William, okay, he's a high school student, didn't want William to attend this mandatory class at Democracy Prep where he attends. It's a charter school that promoted hostility toward whites as a race and forced William to make professions about his racial, sexual, gender, and religious identities in verbal class exercises and in graded written homework assignments, which created a hostile environment. Now, this is all according to the federal lawsuit that was filed. Now, William's a senior at this high school, and he's biracial. His mom is black, and his white father, who has passed away. So it's just mom who's here to defend William's right to not have to do this. And as the lawsuit states, William's statements are subject to scrutiny, interrogation, and derogatory labeling of students, teachers, and school administrators. William is still being coerced to accept and affirm politicized and discriminatory principles and statements that he cannot, in conscience, affirm.
What's really great about this story, it's a horrible story, but notice the first thing. You do not get allowed out of these classes.
Mandatory.
You are mandated. We saw yesterday, we were talking about San Diego, and they were defending themselves in a little bit by saying things like, well, these aren't mandated, or what's going on in Connecticut, right? With the superintendent of public schools out there, mandating Latino and Puerto Rican history courses. They're electives now, but we hope they will be mandated, just like this is mandated. And so this kid who's part white, literally, God bless the mother, who's black, for recognizing that my son is part white. That part of him he shouldn't hate. Right? He should not irrationally hate part of himself. And they won't let him out. I mean, this is a black mother demanding this. It's not some uppity white mother who's you want to call her fragile? If this were a white woman, you'd call her fragile and ignore her. But what are you going to do? Call the black woman fragile? I'd love to see you try it. Now, it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But if the precedent is set, and I said this in the show yesterday, if you're compelling teachers and then students to hate whiteness, and if they are white, to hate themselves for being white, this cannot pass federal law muster. What is the difference between teaching a young black kid to hate being black? And if you had never, can you imagine a situation in an American court where a teacher or a school who spent class after class convincing black kids that to be black is to be evil? Can you imagine a situation in which an American court would not punish to the nth degree the school who did that? Now, why is it okay simply to do it to white kids? And I still think the law holds. And I still think there are plenty of judges and plenty of courts and plenty of juries that would adhere to the law. This can't be allowed to happen. You can't base your entire anti-racism program on getting white people to hate themselves and to getting non-whites to hate whites, or to the very idea of whiteness. Mom's got the right angle here, and if there's some pro bono lawyer out there who has got enough money to retire, take this case, help out with this case. Let's bring a case like this into the major courts, even if the school settles or backs down. Let's make an example of this so there is an outlet. I guarantee you the law will come down on the side of anti-racism, even racism against white people.
Well, and according to Mom's lawsuit, she says that William was repeatedly threatened with material harm, including a failing grade and non-graduation, if he failed to comply with their requirements. That alone, a judge should look at it and be like, you cannot do that.
I mean, you're telling a kid because of his performance in one class, he will be withheld from everything else he does is eradicated. This is staggeringly illegal. We've got to, but what's even more staggering than the illegality of this is how much this is happening and the courts aren't involved.
Well,
no one's doing anything to stop this.
And what was really good about this case when the lawsuit was brought forth, they have, dotted their I's, crossed their T's, because they included nearly 150 pages of exhibits documenting the curriculum in the graduation requirement. Called Sociology of Change, which allegedly promotes intersectionality and critical race theory. So they made sure to include actually what's being taught. They actually do their homework. And so some of the screenshots of the material include information about internalized oppression, which was defined as people being within the groups who suffer the most from the mistreatment and who internalize the ideology of inferiority. Internalized privilege, defined as unearned sense of entitlement among the members of a privileged group, and can be expressed as a denial of the existence of oppression and paternalism. And they also included, just for good measure, a list of institutional examples that simply state that a woman making less than a man at the same job is institutionalized sexism. Oh, good.
Even if the woman has added benefits that the man doesn't have, that the woman can walk away from her job.
We can't do any of that.
Right.
None of that counts. Nope. We're just going with our definitions here.
And again, the kid took math classes, the kid took reading classes, the kids did all sorts of other work to tell the kid, because he will not sign on to this political creed, he will be denied a degree, is racism. It is bigotry of the highest order. I said it before, I'll say it again. When you see the words anti-racist anything, that's the new buzzword. That means justifying racism against one group to make all the other groups feel well. It is the definition of racism, and it wouldn't stand in our courts. Take it to the courts, please.
No, we're still in Rona time. We still have the coronavirus out there. It's still a pandemic. And so our students, among the other many considerations of what's happening in lives, need to remember that their privacy is being, vanished. It's starting to vanish. If not already, it's gone. They need to understand that their privacy is in jeopardy. And so there has been criticism directed at a lot of companies because all these students are online, and all of the privacy that these companies such as ProctorU, which is one of the largest online proctoring vendors, they're using various technologies to get your information. Specifically, ProctorU is using facial recognition technology, controlling mouse movements, and retaining the ability to disable background apps, which could cause a computer to operate in an unintended manner. And now, I guess, college student, high school student, even elementary student, teachers, everyone, have you thought about this yet? Because I think a lot of people have not.
We've been talking about this since 2011 when we began to fight privately here at Freedom Project Common Core and the Common Core data gathering scam that was coming. And it was a big deal. It was one of the things that most annoyed parents was the fragility of all this data that was going to follow these kids for the rest of their life, getting into the hands of so many people indiscriminately. The schools making money and profit off of selling the most delicate aspects of your kids' private records to other people. Well, now it's gotten so bad. Look at the story we just covered about what they're learning, how they are literally institutionalizing racism as a tool to fight racism. As bad as this story about data gathering is, it seems trivial to me now. What 10 years ago was perhaps the worst aspect of the Common Core scam, the absolute ripping apart of family and child privacy, now looks tame compared to what they're actually doing in the classroom.
Well, and that's kind of like, that's their intent, is to little by little.
Shock and awe.
Yeah, just chip away at it, and then it'll become like, oh, okay, whatever. So you may be sitting at home right now being like, yeah, okay, well, they're going to get my information anyway, whatever. And so then you just let it slide. You just let it slide, and it keeps happening. And we actually, I mean, this has been going on, as you said, since Common Core times, but some people are finally waking up a little bit to it. At least the UC Santa Barbara Faculty Association actually issued a warning about ProctorU specifically already last May, and they said, this service mines the data of our students, making them available to unspecified third parties, and therefore violates our students' rights to privacy and potentially implicates the university into becoming a surveillance tool. And that's the thing that I think no one is like pushing back on the universities, like, you're going to be held accountable to this, or are you? I mean, you should be held accountable to this if you're making it available. It
is a tragic hallmark of a modern American life that we have accepted Big Brother. I mean, we were just coming through what was obviously a highly, if you won't go so far with me as to say stolen election, certainly an election fraught with unparalleled fraud, given what we've seen in the past. And we just kind of shrug our shoulders. This is, if Facebook's going to look you in the eye and tell you this is what we're going to do. If Twitter says we're going to censor a sitting president because we don't like his message, our response to that is, okay, just don't take away my Twitter.
That's exactly. Let me keep my apps. Let me keep all that. Yeah. That's exactly it.
You can go ahead and destroy the integrity of our elections, but please don't block my account.
We should have known that when most of America first heard the term Big Brother, it was via the reality show Big Brother, not George Orwell's warnings. So this is a question for you at home, mom and dad, college student, high school student, anyone listening out there. When I say Big Brother, do you think of reality show where a bunch of like 20-somethings get together and wreak havoc? Or do you think of George Orwell, socialism, the death of freedom? Which one do you think of first?
Orwell, 1984.
Did I just speak a whole new language?
What?
It's English.
That's exactly right.
It's English.
These are books that they will never have access again. Because what was a dystopian novel warning people in the 50s of what was coming now is a blueprint for how to take away American freedom.
Well, hey, we're going to give you some real education since you're not reading on your own. So we're going to talk about a great, wonderful, major ancient Greek epic poem known as the Odyssey. It's one of two major ancient Greek epic poems, actually, that goes being attributed to a man named Homer. And it follows Greek hero Odysseus. He's the king of Ithaca. He's journeying home after being long gone at war. It's known as the Trojan War. Well, what happens next, Dr. Duke?
Well, you do wonder. You mentioned are kids these days even recognizing the words Orwell and Orwell?
No.
You wonder when they hear the word Homer anymore. Do they think of actual Homer or Doe?
Of course, Doe.
Right, exactly. That's the only touchstone we have there. And I said at the beginning of the week, tomorrow's show, we're going to cover how public schools across the country, from California to Massachusetts, are beginning to ban and pull classic books of literature from the classroom. They're almost all gone anyway. What's left of them, one of the few books that was left in the Common Core recommended books, by the way, was the Odyssey. Now it's going to be pulled out. So there are 3 books in particular the story is going to cover. It's going to cover removing the Odyssey, removing To Kill a Mockingbird, and to remove Scarlet Letter from American schools. 3 great works of American literature. 2 of American literature anyway. And so what I wanted to dedicate the instant classics to this week are those books. We did a segment on the Odyssey yesterday. We're going to do a segment from the Odyssey again today. This is that harrowing scene where at the end of the book, Odysseus, after 20 years being gone, makes it back to his home in Ithaca. He has spent 10 years fighting the Trojan War, 10 years being battered around the Mediterranean by angry gods and by monsters, punished for certain things that he did when he was a soldier. 20 years, he finally returns home. And one of the most moving passages in the entire Odyssey is when the Odysseus is disguised by Athena. He's disguised to look like an old beggar. No one can recognize him. They think he's just a harmless old man, except his dog. Right before he left 20 years ago, he had purchased a puppy and began training it. Little Argos, his name was. Now that dog is 20 years old, and it is completely neglected by the suitors who have taken over his house. This beautiful dog that was bred for hunting, is lying flea-bitten on a pile of dung, ox dung, sick and dying. But he, the dog, sees Odysseus. He sees through what the gods have done. He recognizes his master. This is the interchange from the Odyssey. As they were speaking, a dog that had been lying asleep raised his head and pricked up his ears. This was Argos, whom Odysseus had bred before setting out for Troy. But he had never had any enjoyment from the dog. In the old days, he used to be taken out by the young men when they went hunting wild goats or deers or hare. But now that his master was gone, Argos was lying neglected on the heaps of mule and cow dung that lay in front of the stable doors till the men should come and draw it away. And he was full of fleas. As soon as he saw Odysseus standing there, disguise or no disguise, he dropped his ears and wagged his tail, but he could not get close to his master. When Odysseus saw the dog on the other side of the yard, he dashed a tear from his eyes without Eumaeus seeing it. He entered the well-built mansion and made straight for the riotous pretenders who had taken over the hall. But Argos passed away into the darkness of death, now that he had fulfilled his destiny of faith and seen his master once more after 20 years. That's the kind of writing we don't want black kids exposed to. Too white there. Too much loving of the love between a man and a dog, the attachments between animals and people, this moving scene between Odysseus and 20 lost years. All of that's not the kind of stuff we should be reading black kids.
All right, before we go, just a reminder that the best way to keep up with our various shows here at Freedom Project is to follow us all on Parler. So take 10 seconds, start following at Duke Pesta, at Katie, and at Freedom Project. And if you're a fan of this show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support the Patriot Club, and we're going to send you an incredible tumbler that will just keep you hydrated all year long. All you have to do to get it is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. Now, as always, we're wrapping things up with the fun fact of the day. Notable alums of Dalton School, we're back in posh Manhattan at Dalton School, include Anderson Cooper, Chevy Chase, Sean Lennon, and Andrew Zimmern. You know who Andrew Zimmern? That chef guy? The food guy. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, Jeffrey Epstein was actually a teacher there back in 1973 to 1975.
Jeffrey Epstein, yeah. Before there was an Epstein Island, he was picking him up at the Dalton School. And that wraps up this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, if you got $54,000 you want to piss away, send it to us. We'll take it.